My name is Luca Moretti, and for most of my life, people feared me long before they ever met me. Some called me a businessman. Others called me a king. My enemies called me something else entirely. But regardless of what name people used, everyone agreed on one thing. Luca Moretti always won. I wasn't born into power. I wasn't raised in luxury. And I certainly didn't inherit an empire. Everything I owned was built through sacrifice, discipline, and years of fighting battles that nobody ever saw. When I was 19 years old, my father died unexpectedly. He left behind a small transportation company drowning in debt. Most people thought the company would collapse within months. Creditors were circling. Competitors were waiting. Friends disappeared. Family members argued over what little remained. Everybody expected me to sell the business and walk away. Instead, I did the exact opposite. I took control. The first few years were brutal. I worked 18-hour days. Some nights, I slept in my office. Other nights, I slept in my car because there wasn't enough money for both payroll and personal comfort. Every dollar mattered. Every decision mattered. Failure wasn't an option. Slowly, things changed. The company grew, then expanded, then multiplied. Transportation became shipping. Shipping became logistics. Logistics became construction. Construction became real estate. By the time I turned 35, the small company my father left behind had transformed into a billion-dollar empire. Private jets, luxury hotels, commercial properties, international contracts. The world suddenly treated me differently. The same people who once doubted me now wanted my attention. The same people who ignored me now wanted invitations to my events. Success has a strange way of changing people. But there was one person who seemed different. At least that's what I believed. Her name was Sophia Bennett. I met Sophia during a charity fundraiser hosted at one of my hotels. The room was filled with politicians, celebrities, investors, and influential people. Most conversations that night felt fake. Everyone wanted something. Everyone had an agenda. Then I met Sophia. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't chasing attention, or at least it seemed that way. She was intelligent, confident, beautiful, the kind of woman who could walk into a crowded room and instantly become impossible to ignore. But what attracted me most wasn't her appearance. It was how she spoke to me. Unlike everyone else, she didn't treat me like a powerful businessman. She treated me like a normal person. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not admired, not feared.
Seen.
We started dating shortly afterward, and for a while life felt perfect. Sophia became part of everything. Family dinners, business events, vacations, holiday celebrations. Within 2 years, she knew nearly everyone in my world. My advisors trusted her. My staff respected her. Even my security team liked her. When I proposed, nobody seemed surprised. People said we were perfect together. Honestly, I believed it too. Looking back now, that was my biggest mistake. Because the person I thought I knew never actually existed. The real Sophia was hiding behind a mask. And I was too blinded by love to notice. The attack happened 6 months before our wedding. I remember every detail.
The rain.
The road. The darkness. I had spent the day attending meetings outside the city. Around midnight, I began driving home. My security convoy followed several minutes behind. The highway was mostly empty. Everything seemed normal. Then suddenly, a truck appeared. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then it accelerated.
Fast.
Too fast. Directly toward my vehicle. I barely had time to react. The collision sounded like an explosion. Metal twisted. Glass shattered. Pain shot through my body. The world spun. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital.
Machines surrounded me. Doctors stood nearby.
The smell of disinfectant filled the air. For several seconds, I couldn't understand what was happening. Then I tried to move. Nothing. My legs wouldn't respond. Fear unlike anything I'd ever experienced gripped my chest. A doctor approached my bed. His face looked serious. Too serious. "Luca," he said quietly, "you suffered severe injuries during the accident." I swallowed hard. My legs. The doctor hesitated. Then he spoke the words that changed everything. We don't know if you'll walk again. The room became silent. I stared at him, waiting for him to tell me it was a mistake, waiting for him to say everything would be fine. But those words never came. News of the accident spread immediately. Television networks covered the story. Newspapers published headlines. Social media exploded with rumors. The mighty Luca Moretti had fallen, and the wolves smelled blood. Business rivals became aggressive. Competitors challenged contracts. Investors became nervous. Everyone sensed weakness, including people inside my own circle. At first, Sophia appeared devastated. She stayed beside my hospital bed, held my hand, cried in front of doctors, promised she'd never leave me. Everyone praised her loyalty. Everyone admired her devotion, including me. But as weeks passed, something felt wrong, very wrong. Instead of focusing on my recovery, Sophia became interested in other things. Company ownership, trust funds, corporate documents, legal agreements, financial structures. Questions she had never cared about suddenly became important. One afternoon, she spent nearly an hour discussing inheritance laws with one of my attorneys. When I asked why, she smiled. "I'm just trying to protect our future." The answer sounded reasonable, yet something felt off. A few weeks later, I returned home. Officially, I was still unable to walk. The wheelchair became part of my daily life.
People pitied me,
Sympathized with me.
whispered about me.
I hated every second of it. Then one morning, everything changed. My doctor entered my rehabilitation room carrying new test results. His expression looked surprisingly optimistic. "Luca," he said, "I have good news." I stared at him. "What kind of good news?" He smiled. "The damage isn't as severe as we originally believed." My heart nearly stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there's a strong chance you'll recover completely." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then he continued, "But recovery will take time." Over the next several weeks, therapy became my entire life. Slowly, miraculously, I improved. First I could stand, then walk a few steps, then walk farther. Soon I was moving almost normally. The doctor was amazed. My therapists were amazed. Everyone involved considered it extraordinary. But then an idea entered my mind. A dangerous idea, because by that point I no longer trusted everyone around me, especially Sophia. So I made a decision. I told almost nobody about my progress. Not my staff, not my business associates, and definitely not my fiancé. Instead, I kept pretending. I stayed in the wheelchair. I acted weak, vulnerable, broken. And then I waited, because deep inside, I knew something wasn't right. I knew someone was hiding something. What I didn't know was that the truth would destroy everything I believed about the woman I was about to marry. For the next 3 months, I lived a double life. During the day, I remained the broken man everyone expected me to be. I sat in a wheelchair. I allowed nurses to help me. I attended meetings looking weak and vulnerable. I let people believe my future had been destroyed. But every night, when everyone else was asleep, I stood up. I walked. I trained. I recovered. And most importantly,
I watched.
Because the more helpless people believed I was, the more comfortable they became. And comfortable people make mistakes. The first mistake came from Sophia. One evening, I was sitting in my study reviewing financial reports when she entered carrying 2 glasses of wine. She smiled warmly. The same smile that had made me fall in love with her years ago. "Working again?" she asked. I laughed softly. "Trying to." She handed me a glass, then sat beside me. For several minutes we talked about ordinary things. The wedding, travel plans, future investments. Everything seemed normal. Then she asked a question that immediately caught my attention. "What happens if you decide to step away from the company permanently?" I looked at her carefully. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "You're recovering slowly. What if you never return to work?" The question sounded innocent, but something about it felt wrong. I smiled. "I'll return." She forced a smile. "Of course." But disappointment flashed across her face for just a second. A tiny moment. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I did. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, I asked my chief financial officer, Victor, for a complete report of every financial request made during the past 6 months. 2 hours later, he arrived carrying a folder. Inside were dozens of documents, transfers, authorizations, account reviews, legal requests. As I examined the paperwork, one name appeared repeatedly. Sophia Bennett. She had been requesting information about ownership structures, inheritance procedures, emergency succession plans, corporate voting rights. Questions no fiancé should normally care about. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. Then I discovered something truly strange. Sophia had recently scheduled 3 private meetings with our corporate attorney, without telling me, without informing anyone. When I confronted the attorney, he looked uncomfortable. She said she was helping prepare wedding documents. I nodded. What kind of documents? The attorney hesitated, then handed me a file. As I opened it, my stomach tightened. Sophia had been asking detailed questions about what would happen if I died. Not retired. Not resigned.
Died.
I stared at the pages for several minutes, trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. But deep down, I already knew there wasn't. A week later, another incident occurred, one that removed almost all remaining doubt. Around midnight, I woke up thirsty. The house was quiet. Most of the staff had gone home. I carefully stood from my bed and walked downstairs. The ability to move freely still felt incredible. As I approached the kitchen, I heard voices. Someone was talking. Quietly. I stopped. The voice belonged to Sophia. She was speaking on the phone. At first I couldn't hear clearly. Then I moved closer. And everything changed. He still believes it. Silence. Then Sophia laughed softly. No, he suspects nothing. My pulse quickened. I moved closer. He'll sign eventually. Another pause. Then came the sentence that made my blood run cold. If things continue this way, everything will belong to us.
Us. Not me. Us.
Who was us? And why was she talking about my empire like it already belonged to her? For the next several minutes I listened. Most of the conversation was vague,
Careful.
deliberately hidden. But one thing became clear. Sophia wasn't speaking like a loving fiancé. She was speaking like someone executing a plan. When the call ended, I quietly returned upstairs. Sleep never came. I spent the entire night staring at the ceiling, thinking, analyzing, connecting pieces. And by sunrise, I reached a terrifying conclusion. The accident might not have been an accident. The thought seemed insane, paranoid, dangerous. Yet I couldn't ignore it. Too many things didn't make sense. The timing, the questions, the documents, the secret phone calls. Everything pointed in one direction.
Someone wanted me out of the way.
And Sophia knew more than she was admitting. The next day, I hired a private investigation team. Not ordinary investigators. The best money could buy. Former intelligence officers. Former detectives. People skilled at uncovering hidden truths. I gave them one instruction. Find out everything. About Sophia. About the accident. About anyone connected to either. For 2 weeks I heard nothing. Then one afternoon my lead investigator requested an urgent meeting. His expression was grim. Very grim. As soon as he entered my office, I knew the news wouldn't be good. He placed a thick folder on my desk, then slowly pushed it toward me. What you're about to see, he said, is going to change your life. I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, bank records, phone logs, travel records, and one photograph that immediately caught my attention. Sophia, standing beside a man I had never seen before. The photo had been taken 3 months before my accident. The two looked far too comfortable together, far too familiar. I looked up. Who is he? The investigator's answer nearly stopped my heart. His name is Adrian Volkov. I frowned. The name sounded familiar. Then I remembered. Adrian Volkov wasn't just a businessman. He was one of my biggest rivals. one of the few men powerful enough to challenge me. The investigator continued. Your fiancé has been meeting him secretly for over a year. The room became silent. My hands tightened around the folder.
A year.
A full year. Every business trip. Every conference. Every romantic dinner. Every promise. Every kiss. Every word. Had it all been a lie? The investigator wasn't finished. He slid another photograph across the desk. Then another. Then another. Each one felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. Sophia and Adrian. Together. Again and again. Meeting in secret.
Planning something.
Hiding something. And suddenly, for the first time since the accident, I stopped feeling hurt. I stopped feeling confused. I stopped feeling afraid. Instead, I felt angry. Because if Sophia and Adrian were working together, then my accident may have been only the beginning. And if that was true, someone was about to discover that Luca Moretti was far more dangerous standing up than sitting in a wheelchair. For several minutes, I sat there staring at the photographs. Each image felt worse than the last. Sophia and Adrian Volkov. Sophia entering his office. Sophia leaving his penthouse. Sophia boarding a private jet registered to one of his companies. The date stretched back more than a year. More than a year. While she was planning a wedding with me. While she was telling me she loved me. While she was sleeping beside me every night. The investigator remained silent, allowing me to absorb everything. Finally, I looked up. How much does she know about the accident? The investigator took a deep breath. That's what we're still trying to determine. I nodded slowly. Part of me wanted to believe there was an explanation. A misunderstanding. Some missing piece I hadn't seen. But another part of me already knew the truth. Sophia wasn't a victim. She was involved. The only question was how deeply. Over the next week, I received more reports. More evidence. More lies. Every document painted a clearer picture. Sophia and Adrian weren't simply having an affair. They were planning something. Something big. Financial records showed secret payments. Encrypted communications. Meetings with attorneys and consultants. The deeper we looked, the uglier it became. Then my investigator called one evening. His voice sounded different. Urgent. We found something. My pulse quickened. What is it? You're going to want to hear this yourself. An hour later, I was sitting in a secure office reviewing surveillance recordings. One video immediately caught my attention. The footage came from a private restaurant. Sophia and Adrian sat alone in a secluded booth. The audio wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. I watched as Adrian leaned forward. Then I heard him say something that made my stomach twist. If he had died, everything would have been easier. The room became silent. I stared at the screen, certain I had heard correctly. Then Sophia answered, and her response shattered the last piece of my heart. I know. No hesitation. No shock. No outrage. Just acceptance. As if they had discussed it many times before. I felt physically sick. For years, I had trusted her with everything. My future. My family. My business. My life. And now I was listening to her discuss my possible death like it was a minor inconvenience. The recording continued. Adrian smiled. At least the wheelchair changed things. Sophia nodded. People are starting to see him differently. Good. Adrian took a sip of wine. A weak king loses followers. I slammed my fist onto the table. The investigator looked at me carefully. You okay?
No.
I wasn't okay. The woman I loved had betrayed me. The man sitting beside her wanted my empire. And together they were treating my suffering like a business opportunity. But the worst moment hadn't come yet. Because near the end of the recording, Adrian asked a question. A question that changed everything. Do you think he suspects anything? Sophia laughed softly. The sound made my skin crawl. Then she answered. Luca trusts me completely. The room fell silent. I looked away from the screen. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then I stood up. Slowly. Calmly. The investigator frowned. What are you going to do? I looked at him. And for the first time since the accident, I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because I finally understood the game. They think I'm weak. The investigator nodded. They do. I walked toward the window, overlooking the city. The lights glittered below. Beautiful.
Cold.
Merciless.
Just like the people who had betrayed me.
They think I'm helpless. The investigator remained quiet. And that's exactly why they're going to lose. The next morning, I began preparing. Not for revenge. For war. Because if Sophia and Adrian were trying to take my empire, I wasn't going to stop them. I was going to let them try. Sometimes the best trap isn't the one you build. It's the one your enemies walk into themselves. For the next several weeks, I continued pretending. The wheelchair remained. The weakness remained. The performance continued. Meanwhile, Sophia grew increasingly confident. She started making decisions without consulting me, attending meetings on my behalf, speaking to executives as if she already controlled everything. Many people noticed. Nobody questioned it. After all, they believed I was finished. Exactly as she wanted. Exactly as I wanted. One evening, Sophia entered my office carrying several documents. She smiled sweetly. The same fake smile I now hated. I need your signature. I glanced at the papers. Corporate restructuring agreements. Ownership transfers. Voting authority modifications. Very clever. To someone unfamiliar with legal language, they looked harmless. To me, they looked like theft. Sophia placed a pen in my hand. If we move some responsibilities to me, it will make things easier. I looked up. Our eyes met. For a brief moment, I wondered whether she felt guilty, whether any part of the woman I loved still existed. If it did, I couldn't find her. So I smiled, then signed. Sophia's face lit up with excitement. She thought she had won. What she didn't realize was that the documents were fake. Every page, every clause, every signature line. My attorneys had prepared them specifically for her. A test. And she failed it perfectly. As soon as she left the room, my lawyer entered through a side door. She took the bait. I nodded. Good. The lawyer smiled. She's getting careless.
No.
I looked toward the door. She's getting confident. And confident people make dangerous mistakes. What none of us knew was that Sophia's biggest mistake was still ahead. Because within days, she would do something so reckless, so unbelievable, that it would expose not only her betrayal, but the truth about the night someone tried to kill me. The following week began like every other. Sophia played the role of the devoted fiancé. I played the role of the broken man. And Adrian Volkov continued believing he was winning. But behind the scenes, everything was changing. My investigators were working around the clock. My attorneys were preparing documents. My security team was monitoring every move Sophia and Adrian made. The closer we looked, the uglier the truth became. Then one afternoon, my lead investigator called. His voice sounded excited. Luca. We got them. I sat forward. What happened? We intercepted a meeting. My pulse quickened. What kind of meeting? The kind that proves everything. An hour later, I arrived at a secure office. Several monitors filled the room. Security footage played on one of them. The recording showed Adrian entering a private warehouse near the harbor. A few minutes later, Sophia arrived. Neither knew they were being watched. The investigator pressed play. For several minutes, they discussed finances, ownership structures, future plans. Then the conversation shifted. And that's when everything changed. Adrian looked directly at Sophia. We should have finished the job. The room fell silent. My heart began pounding. Sophia lowered her voice. That wasn't part of the agreement. Agreement. The word echoed in my mind. Adrian laughed. He's still alive. That's the problem. Sophia looked nervous. Stop talking about it. But Adrian didn't stop. Instead, he leaned closer. The truck driver got paid. I froze. Every person in the room froze. The investigator slowly paused the recording. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. The truth was finally in front of us. The accident wasn't an accident.
It was an attack.
A planned attack. Someone had deliberately tried to kill me. The investigator looked at me. Luca. I raised my hand. I couldn't speak. For months I had suspected it. For months I had feared it. But hearing confirmation was different. Much different. because now there was no doubt, no uncertainty, no hope that maybe everything was a misunderstanding. Someone had tried to murder me, and the woman I loved knew about it. I stared at the screen, watching Sophia, searching her face, looking for regret, looking for guilt, looking for anything human. Instead, I found fear. Not fear for me, fear for herself, because she knew exactly what would happen if the truth came out. The investigator continued the recording. Sophia crossed her arms. We agreed not to discuss that. Adrian smirked. Relax. No one knows. Then he laughed. The sound made my blood boil. A crippled Luca Moretti is almost better than a dead one. The room became silent again. I slowly stood up. No wheelchair. No weakness. No acting. For the first time in months, everyone in the room saw the real me. The investigator smiled slightly. Looks like therapy worked. I nodded. It did. Then I looked back at the screen. And now it's their turn. The next few days were spent preparing. Not emotionally, legally, strategically,
Carefully.
every piece of evidence was organized. Every recording documented. Every financial transaction traced. My attorneys built a case so strong it could destroy anyone involved. Then we waited. Because timing matters. And I wanted Sophia exposed at the exact moment she believed she had won. The opportunity arrived sooner than expected. A week later, Sophia announced a major engagement celebration. A private gathering. Business leaders, investors, politicians, media representatives. Nearly everyone important would be there. She planned to formally introduce herself as the future head of the Moretti Empire. Exactly what I needed. The night of the event arrived. The ballroom was packed. Champagne flowed. Music played. Guests laughed and celebrated. Meanwhile, I sat quietly at home, watching everything through security feeds. Sophia stood on stage, confident, elegant, victorious. She wore a white designer gown. A ring worth more than most houses sparkled on her finger. Looking at her, nobody would ever guess she was hiding dark secrets. Then she picked up a microphone. The room grew silent. She smiled. I want to thank everyone for supporting me during the most difficult chapter of my life. Applause filled the ballroom. Sophia continued. Watching someone you love lose everything is heartbreaking. More applause. I almost laughed. The performance was impressive. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her. Then she added, but sometimes life forces us to move forward. The crowd nodded. And right then, I knew it was time. I picked up my phone and made a single call. 30 seconds later, the ballroom doors opened. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Sophia looked toward the entrance. Then her smile disappeared, because walking through those doors was me. Not in a wheelchair, not with assistance, not broken, walking
Perfectly. Confidently.
The room exploded into shocked whispers. People stood from their seats. Several guests dropped their drinks. Sophia looked like she had seen a ghost. Her hands began shaking. The microphone nearly slipped from her grasp. I walked slowly toward the stage. Every step felt heavier than the last. Not because of pain, because of what was coming next. And when I finally reached the stage, Sophia whispered one word. Luca. I looked directly into her eyes, then smiled. And for the first time in months, she looked terrified. The entire ballroom fell silent. No music, no laughter, no conversations. Just shock. Pure shock. More than 200 guests stared at me as I walked toward the stage. Some looked confused. Others looked terrified. Many simply couldn't believe what they were seeing. For months the world had believed Luca Moretti was confined to a wheelchair. A broken man. A defeated man. A man whose empire was slipping away. And now, I was walking. Perfectly. Sophia stood frozen beneath the spotlight. The microphone trembled in her hands. Her face had gone completely pale. The confidence she carried only moments earlier was gone. The room watched as I slowly climbed the stairs to the stage. One step, then another, then another. Each step felt like the collapse of every lie she had built. When I finally reached the stage, Sophia took a step backward. Her voice barely worked. "Luca?" I smiled. "Miss me?" Gasps spread across the ballroom. People looked between us, trying to understand what was happening, trying to understand why the man they believed was paralyzed was standing in front of them. Sophia swallowed hard. "You can walk." I nodded. "Yes." Silence. Her eyes widened. "For how long?" I looked directly into her eyes. "Long enough." The crowd exchanged nervous whispers. Adrian Volkov stood near the front of the room. For the first time all evening, he looked worried. Very worried. I turned toward the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen." The room instantly became silent. I apologize for interrupting the celebration. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. "I won't take much of your time." Then I looked back at Sophia. "But before this evening continues, I think everyone deserves to know the truth." The fear on Sophia's face intensified. "Luke?" I ignored her. Instead, I nodded toward the entrance. The ballroom doors opened again. This time, several attorneys entered, along with members of my security team. Behind them came my lead investigator carrying a large black case. The atmosphere changed immediately. People realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something much bigger. Something serious. The investigator walked onto the stage, placed the case on a table, then opened it. Inside were documents, photographs, bank records, audio transcripts, evidence. A lot of evidence. Sophia stared at the case, then at me, then back at the case. Her hands started shaking. I picked up a folder. For months, I believed my accident was exactly that. I paused. An accident. The room listened carefully. But evidence has revealed something very different. Adrian suddenly stepped forward. "Careful, Luca." I smiled.
No.
I looked directly at him. "You should be careful." The room erupted into whispers. Adrian's face darkened. I removed several photographs from the folder, then displayed them on a large screen behind the stage. Instantly, the audience gasped. There they were, Sophia and Adrian, together. Secret meetings, private dinners, hotel visits, business discussions. Months and months of hidden meetings. Sophia looked like she couldn't breathe. Adrian clenched his jaw. I wasn't finished. Not even close. Next came financial records, secret payments, offshore accounts, hidden transactions. The crowd watched in disbelief. Then came the audio recordings, the most damaging evidence of all. My investigator pressed a button. The ballroom speakers came alive. And suddenly, everyone heard Adrian's voice. The truck driver got paid. The room exploded.
Gasps, shouts,
Chaos. People stood from their chairs. Others covered their mouths. Several guests immediately began recording with their phones. Sophia looked completely destroyed. The recording continued. A crippled Luca Moretti is almost better than a dead one. Absolute silence followed. The kind of silence that only comes after something truly horrifying. Then all eyes turned toward Sophia, because everybody wanted to know one thing. Was it true? Sophia's eyes filled with tears. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of fear. Fear because the truth had finally caught her. Fear because there was nowhere left to run. I stepped closer. Tell them. She stared at me. Tell them the truth. She shook her head. Tears streamed down her face. Luca, tell them. The microphone slipped from her hand. For several seconds, she simply stood there,
broken.
Then finally, she spoke. And her voice was barely above a whisper. I never wanted him to die. The ballroom erupted again. That single sentence confirmed everything. People looked horrified. Investors backed away. Friends turned their backs. Business associates avoided eye contact. Years of reputation disappeared in seconds. Adrian immediately tried to leave. Unfortunately, for him, he never reached the door. Law enforcement officers were already waiting. The moment he moved, they stepped forward. Within seconds, he was surrounded. The look on his face was priceless. For the first time, he understood. The game was over. Completely over. The officers escorted him away, while cameras flashed nonstop. Sophia watched everything collapse around her. The empire she thought she would inherit.
Gone.
The future she imagined.
Gone.
The lies she built her life around.
Gone.
Finally, she looked at me.
The real me.
Not the man in the wheelchair. Not the man she thought was weak. The man she betrayed. And for the first time in years, I saw genuine regret. Please, she whispered. I said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Love had already died. Trust had already died. The future we planned together had died long ago. The woman standing before me was no longer the person I once loved. She was simply someone who made a choice, and now she had to live with it. I turned away, then walked toward the exit. Behind me, the ballroom remained silent. Nobody celebrated. Nobody applauded. Nobody moved, because everyone had just witnessed the fall of two people who believed they were untouchable. As I stepped outside, cool night air filled my lungs. For the first time since the attack, I felt free. Not because I won, not because my enemies lost, but because the truth was finally exposed. Sometimes the strongest man in the room isn't the one who fights back immediately. Sometimes it's the one who waits, who watches, who survives. And when the moment comes, lets the truth do all the work. Sophia looked like she couldn't breathe. Adrian clenched his jaw. I wasn't finished. Not even close. Next came financial records, secret payments, offshore accounts, hidden transactions. The crowd watched in disbelief. Then came the audio recordings, the most damaging evidence of all. My investigator pressed a button. The ballroom speakers came alive. And suddenly, everyone heard Adrian's voice. The truck driver got paid. The room exploded.
Gasps. Shouts.
Chaos. People stood from their chairs. Others covered their mouths. Several guests immediately began recording with their phones. Sophia looked completely destroyed. The recording continued. A crippled Luca Moretti is almost better than a dead one. Absolute silence followed. The kind of silence that only comes after something truly horrifying. Then all eyes turned toward Sophia, because everybody wanted to know one thing. Was it true? Sophia's eyes filled with tears. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of fear. Fear because the truth had finally caught her. Fear because there was nowhere left to run. I stepped closer. Tell them. She stared at me. Tell them the truth. She shook her head. Tears streamed down her face. Luca, tell them. The microphone slipped from her hand. For several seconds, she simply stood there.
Broken.
Then finally, she spoke. And her voice was barely above a whisper. I never wanted him to die. The ballroom erupted again. That single sentence confirmed everything. People looked horrified. Investors backed away. Friends turned their backs. Business associates avoided eye contact. Years of reputation disappeared in seconds. Adrian immediately tried to leave. Unfortunately, for him, he never reached the door. Law enforcement officers were already waiting. The moment he moved, they stepped forward. Within seconds, he was surrounded. The look on his face was priceless. For the first time, he understood. The game was over. Completely over. The officers escorted him away, while cameras flashed nonstop. Sophia watched everything collapse around her. The empire she thought she would inherit.
Gone.
The future she imagined.
Gone.
The lies she built her life around.
Gone.
Finally, she looked at me.
The real me.
Not the man in the wheelchair. Not the man she thought was weak. The man she betrayed. And for the first time in years, I saw genuine regret. Please, she whispered. I said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Love had already died. Trust had already died. The future we planned together had died long ago. The woman standing before me was no longer the person I once loved. She was simply someone who made a choice. And now she had to live with it. I turned away, then walked toward the exit. Behind me, the ballroom remained silent. Nobody celebrated. Nobody applauded. Nobody moved. Because everyone had just witnessed the fall of two people who believed they were untouchable. As I stepped outside, cool night air filled my lungs. For the first time since the attack, I felt free. Not because I won. Not because my enemies lost. But because the truth was finally exposed. Sometimes the strongest man in the room isn't the one who fights back immediately. Sometimes it's the one who waits, who watches, who survives. And when the moment comes, lets the truth do all the work.